G'day friends and fans, welcome to Dave Talks Stuff Ukraine War Update for the 4th of July 2026. As the war continues, I'll continue to bring comprehensive news and opinions from both sides. Now, Russia has taken more territory in the north, very little territory by the looks of it. Last month was very small. This month is shaping up to be bigger. They've started off strong with gains from previous month will carry over into this month, as other months have also carried over. Because the Russian army is running on approximately a 6.5 week cycle, though that doesn't mean they're taking a city every 6.5 weeks. They're rotating their troops, keeping them fresh. So about every 6.5 weeks, over the course of 6.5 weeks, they have momentum, then it slows down, and then they start up again. Now, they don't do it exactly the same time every time. This is the reason I think Ukraine hasn't been able to mount an effective offensive is behind the Russian front lines. There's a build-up, and once the Russians have built up, they have the troop rotation, and that's giving no opening and almost having a second line of defense there waiting anyway. So if they do attack, it's likely only to affect the front line rather than the first line and not the front line. The front line doesn't collapse like it did back in 2022 because it was spread thinner. Now, the Russians have launched multiple air attacks, of course, and somehow Kiev has magically lost power. No, they weren't hit by a missile. No, that's just Russia did some information, eh? Yet they're reporting outages. So which is it? They got outages or not? Were they hit by a missile or not? Why is it so important for Ukraine to deny that they were hit by a missile when in other areas, and sometimes they even tell you what was hit? With explosions in Dnipro, in the docks, of course. It's not actually in Dnipro, it's south of Dnipro. Zaporozhye, lots of activity, although some of them are old markers not removed. Outskirts of Kharkiv, the major strike on the supply line. Yeah, probably at a fuel station. It's often where, because Russia, they love them drone attacks, they love those long-range drone attacks, although this time I think it was a KH-69. And we have, sometimes they mix it up and say it's a glide bomb. Yeah, they do often mix KH-69s in with the glide bombs because they look similar on radar. You don't actually know which one's which. And until the explosion. And when the explosion, again, even though you may not know which is which, again. So just because Ukraine says, hey, Ukraine, we got hit by this amount of munitions, how do you know? Sometimes I think they just guess. That's why I don't bother going through the lists. I only go through them looking for see when Ukraine admits they were hit and what was hit. Now it looks like Russia's taking a little bit more here and there, but it's not big. This is back to growing, though. I actually think this grew unchallenged. That would be a banishment for Ukraine. But as we go through, we know the Russians have entered the downtown, they've entered Lyman, they've entered the centre of Lyman. And it's scary to think that there's only a few hundred troops, sometimes only 200 troops in some of these areas, because the bulk of the army is just spread out. Sometimes there's only an entire, some of these conflicts are only squads or a squad. Sorry. I do have problems with my eyes. I'm sorry. Trying not to let it distract me. But I got an itchy eyeball. It's a side effect of the medication. I can't help it. All right, so fighting here. Now, of course, they are pushing to establish a bridgehead, another one like this, to launch artillery at Kremosk. I don't know whether or not this is frozen again or the Ukrainians have stopped reporting. I suspect it is frozen. Now, the reason why it's frozen is because I think we've reached that point where we are starting to see a rotation, the slowdown and beginning of rotation of Russian troops. Again, when Russians change their troops, they do so incrementally as well. They don't do it all at the same time either. So they don't do it exactly every 6 weeks or every 6.5 weeks. They do not exactly do it all on the same day. And just like when you go to the bank, never go to the bank at the same time, same branch, same day, same hour. Right? The Russians are doing exactly the same principle when it comes to reinforcements and resupply. Which is why Ukraine keeps saying, oh, look, there was no supply trucks today. We destroyed them all. And then the next day, the Russians advance and take Konstantinovka. Why is that? Because the Russians didn't send trucks. They sent lots of little small delivery bikes instead. They don't resupply the same way. They don't rotate their troops the same way. They do this to confuse the Ukrainians, and it's working, and I don't know why, because if I can see it so obviously, the Ukrainian command should know this very obviously. All it takes is watching a couple of Russian videos and you can see quad bikes. You can see that a lot of the times the trucks are stopped between towns, not in towns. You can see actually times where troops are hauling coming to the front with supplies. It's never the same way. And sometimes, yes, they are dropping off by drones. So there is, I think, a mentality that doesn't seem to be shakeable in the media. I don't think this is coming from Ukrainian high command. I actually do think a lot of this information and glazing is coming from the Ukrainian media. I think they're just so obsessed with winning that they have to spin everything. And eventually the Ukrainians are going to start tuning out. They're going to start not caring or not believing in anything. And I think that's the most dangerous point, because then they're so malleable and you never know which way they're going to go. But it's going to end bad. Now, the maps don't show it. And I do think there's pockets of resistance. But I think the Russians have seized Konstantinovka. They've claimed they've seized Konstantinovka. Over a dozen media outlets outside of Russia say they've seized Konstantinovka. The Ukrainian media and the Western media have denied this. And we'll see tomorrow morning someone run the story and get that the Russians seized Konstantinovka. You get 40,000 views. My channel is suppressed. I need people to start subscribing. It's it's 70 to 80% of people unsubscribing. So my videos, you want the truth to get out there, you have to subscribe. You have to click the like button. It's not my... I know people hate being told, and I know people hate being asked. It seems all the left-wingers just... That's why they trounce you every time, because they know how to play the popularity game. They know what to do. The right doesn't seem to care. That's why Bill Maher's popular. Because he just doesn't care. Doesn't really care. Because he knows the left will always click their like button no matter what he says. Even when he insults them. And I heard somewhere the other day that 80% of his views, or 60% of his views, I forget which, come from clips, not from direct viewing. Which is interesting. Now, Konstantinovka is not the only town to fall, but most of the tiny little towns that fall are not reported, and they're not significant. Now, I thought it was going to be the Battle of Dupanilia, but it looks like the Russians are pushing Turensky to... Again, they want to bring artillery up on this, which puts... well, would have taken pressure off Konstantinovka, but still will, because then they're unable to rush in or try and counterattack Konstantinovka. They'll have to defend Drushka. They have to worry about their supplies at Kremensk, infiltrators at Kremensk. But the real attack, and I think will come last, will be Savutsk. You look at it, the harder parts, it's got the longest supply line. It's got better strategic position with a lot more towns in between it and the Russian forces and these have the open ground, which is easy picking for Ukrainian artillery. Here, the Russians can be slowed down. This line almost held all the way through, but they've been able to flank it. But for now, they've pivoted to flanking. And they'll come up through here eventually. But as they do, it'll be actually through the middle and flowing over. This is the danger for the Russian army, and this is the advantage the Ukrainians have. The defenders have the advantage. Ukraine has the advantage of 800,000, an army of 800,000. Over 110,000 of those are foreigners. But that doesn't matter. It's neither here nor there. It's just probably they're the better fighters. Which is why Russia targets them. Now, a lot of the advantage actually comes from if they stop coming to the Russians. It forces the Russians to use more fuel. It slowly increases the Russian supply lines, which opens those up to more attacks. But the points of vulnerability are at the face, where the defender can see and prepare for the enemy coming. But to counter that, the Russians are grinding. They're always stopping short. Now, the grinding is not new. Grinding attacks date back centuries, in fact, where Ottoman and French artillery would grind at the Italian fortresses. The Habsburgs empire was actually built on Italian-designed fortresses. So the Italians were almost defeated by the French. The French turned around and changed the course of the war and changed the course of Europe forever. And so the French-Italian wars changed the course of Europe and later changed the course of the American war when French-Italian militarists, French and Italian military engineers helped the Americans build forts. If Ukraine does, for now, continue to invest in the same technologies they do now, that is, this idea of bunkering, which they've put so much money into bunkering every town in the East. They tipped their hand to the Russians. Zelensky wasn't supposed to go to war. He stalled the Russians on the Minsk Accords successfully for 6 months before they attacked. But Russia had already figured out this attack didn't start with the attack on ethnic Russians started a decade earlier. And successful negotiations always kept the Russians out of the war for quite some time. Now, that didn't stop Russians from going into Ukraine, just stopped the Russian army from officially going into Ukraine. But they tipped their hand. And now they have to find that. No, I thought it was going to be drones. It still could be drones. It could be this new hacksaw drone. It's odd name, but it is a. I don't think it's called hacksaw anymore. I think it's a new. I think it's actually Bastion. Every time they upgrade it, they change its name. Now, this is a tank drone. Now, it's a third of the size of a regular tank. It's like a T-72, but smaller. It's actually, I should say T-84 because it's Polish. The Polish T-72 is the T-84. Now, it is slightly different, but basically, Ukrainian tank drone. Now, whether they've deployed it or not, or will deploy it or not, I don't know. Some of these technologies that have been talked about haven't arrived on the battlefield yet. But new drones from Ukraine could change the situation on the battlefield because it's a force multiplier if they can apply it effectively. So it's like giving an AK-47 to child warriors in Africa. Look at the mess it made. It was a double-edged sword. You give the wrong weapon to the wrong army, and all you get is devastation. You'll have lots of drones, but if these drones are concentrated, they're easy to kill. That's the problem they have right now. How to effectively use drones when you concentrate them, it doesn't matter. Electronic warfare is not like a bullet. A bullet takes out one drone and if you've got an say you got an AK-47 with skeet shoot, right? And you're going to tell me AK-47 can't fire skeet shoot? No, the new Eclipse ammunition does exactly do that. Fires multiple, fires a fragmenting round, like skeet shoot. So, a drone swarm. Okay, AK-47 versus drone swarm. Drone swarm, you'll kill some, you'll miss most. But electronic warfare is just one pulse. Whatever's in that pulse area is dead. It's quicker, faster, but not cheaper. And the drone swarm, you'll know, head for the electronic warfare station. Right? The first wave always has to take out the electronic warfare station. So for now, Ukraine is just trying to increase the size of its swarms to get it to attack the Russian electronic warfare stations, because when they force it down, they can get a missile, a long-range missile through. Right now, the Ukrainians are asking, where's the Flamingo? They are not successfully hitting long-range targets anymore. And they're trying balloons. And those are getting shot down by Su-27s, because they can fly that high. And they also do have missiles to reach that to the stratosphere. So when Ukraine finds its way to freeze the front, that will be the game changer. For now, they almost achieved it, and only achieved it in places, but that's primarily due to Russia's budget constraints more than anything. And because Russia's budget problems are not secret, Ukraine is trying to exploit that by attacking their economy, particularly making it more expensive to wage war. The problem is they're making it more expensive on themselves at the same time. How is that, you may ask? Because they have to build more missiles and drones. Unless that's the plan all along. And that's where we get to reports that Ukraine wants to build Patriot missiles. And if America gives up the Patriot missiles production to other countries, there goes your advantage, because Ukraine will undercut you in the market with their son. Ukraine will suddenly turn around and have their own homegrown missile Patriot system and undercut them, like they tried to do with the Polish tanks, what they tried to do with the Polish artillery, and of course what they're doing with the British drones. They successfully got away with undercutting the British on the drones. But this is the front. Konstantinovka is under Russian control. There is video evidence to come. And this is fresh. It's less than an hour old at time of recording. Empire Valves. One word. EmpireValves.myshopify.com. Your one-stop shop for enchanting treasures based on my writing. Support the channel today. Make a purchase. Thank you for your purchase. I really appreciate each and every purchase. I would love to make a living from my videos, but people aren't subscribing. Advertising revenue is out of reach. And so I have to try and make a living. All right, so we have, now this is launched. There's 57 can now has been upgraded to carry the KH-69. The Su-57 is not in service, still in testing. Last reports, there are only 3 of them in existence, although the Russians dispute this and claim they have built 169 or ordered 169. The numbers always vary, because remember, the Russians do love to deceive, so take it with a grain of salt, but there's at least 3 of them, because we've only seen 3 of them. Although, yeah, there's... Now, this is actually reported by the West as a stealth missile similar to the Storm Shadow, which is a French-British production, but the French build the Storm Shadow and the French call it the Scalp. Now, KH-69 is a Russian stealth subsonic air-launched cruise missile developed from developed from the 59, and there's a range of at least 400 kilometers. It recently has had its range confirmed at 400 to 300. That depends on altitude of launch and speed at the time of launch. But it has a reduced radar signature compared to its forerunners. Debris has shown that, yeah, it was first detected in April 24 in Ukraine. The attack did destroy parts of the power plant. Institute for the Study of War analysed its attack pattern to improve Ukrainians' air defences, but this is also developed, or licensed, sorry, I should say, to the Indian Air Force. Though it looks like the Indians are replacing with their own group missile anyway, the Brahma, but there's still some sort of technology transfer or some ownership still going on with Russian exports may be down, but not the flow of money or goods from India, which suggests that a lot of these new Indian factories are Russian factories under Indian partnerships and Indian state protection. Yeah, Taurus and Storm Shadow. We forget the French Scalp, but French Scalp is the Storm Shadow. But it does have a lower weight and its cruise speed depends on speed of launch, and it does use a dual GP. It does use a dual guidance system within the. Yeah, it has a lot of optical electrical seeker, which was reported in 22 to increase its accuracy of optical guidance. Now, again, the reason why Russia is attacking with less drones and missiles, although is to spread them out, but also the fact that they can get more through using less. If all they do is know where the Ukrainians are able to operate their electronic warfare, knock out a power station or two, see what goes down, and because they can see the electronic warfare, they can launch less drones. Now, how do you see electronic warfare? Well, that's the secret, isn't it? How their detection systems are picking up the output signals. I have a theory that they just run, they just look for the radiation output, the looking at the heat, looking for the little heat patterns, the telltale signs of them operating, and use their radio detection to use their radio detection to more efficiency, knowing what frequencies they're operating on. You don't have to know the precise frequencies or patterns. You just have to know some of them to know they're there. You can't jam them. You don't have the power. So you go around them. That's what Russia does. They flank. That's all they do. They don't beat their head against a brick wall like Stalin. That's why they're underestimated all the time. They're playing chess, and Ukraine's playing checkers, treating the Russians as if they're Stalin, not Putin. And I don't know why. This is obvious that they're different people. Now, a short time ago, Putin was called to an emergency meeting in Moscow in which the military briefed him on the Konstantinovka operation, claiming to have taken out the auxiliary command post, saying this captured the city and this is key to the liberation of DPR, according to the Russians. Now, Putin immediately instructed the army to determine the incitement, and he's asking for give us a report on the leadership, because he knows hostilities will continue. There you go. So last month, as of last month, this is what they've come up with. And it's a long-winded report laying out how many objectives they've been given and how many they achieved, and got their gratitude, got their little sincere thanks, and like to point out that many so-called imaginary peacekeepers out there are not peacemakers. They continue the war to the last Ukrainian. None of their actions show true intentions. Yeah, you can't talk peace and supply arms. That's what he's saying. But he did send what do you call it? Congratulations, I suppose. Congratulatory happy birthday, America 250. This is what Konstantinovka looks like. The first part is just the opening salvo to Konstantinovka, showing back. When was it? Been almost a year. Look at the difference in drones. The early drones were crude, often made in tiny workshops. But you see, the Ukrainians got cope cages too. Batwing observation drones. You can see. Oh, that's a strike drone. There's what really did it. When once the Russian artillery got in range. So we've seen this before. But there, footage like this. This is the fall of Konstantinovka. The Ukrainians dug in, and the Ukrainians were systematically rooted out. See, Russians coming in, checking each building, and reporting to the drones overhead that's under Russian control. And yeah, each building. Russians came in overnight and went building house to house. They're going to root out what's left of the Ukrainians, but the majority of the city is under control. The majority of city has fallen. They shelled it overnight, killing 80 Ukrainians, which may not sound much, but that's 80 people who are no longer alive because Zelensky wouldn't make peace. That the next major target, it's only 15 kilometers south, of course, but between them is Dushkovia, and that is an important junction. That's a supply line junction into Kursk. I think that's a downloadable version, right? But of course, if EU was winning, why would they lift a ban on nuclear weapons? So obviously, yeah. Now the Russian court has sentenced the main defendant in the assassination plot. This was a case that it smelt and still smells, but someone unnamed, hiding extremist known as Mikhail Belizhnov he was hired for the sum of $50,000 to kill Sputnik's the editor-in-chief, although she actually works for the parent company, the media group Roshniva Zhagovna, and the editor-in-chief of RT, Magnana Simone. Now, this is July last year. Now, he moved to a hideout and was prepared. Right, he was told where to go. He had a Kalashnikov and some ammunition. Now, he was leader of an illegal, outlawed organization where he organized young men, mostly teenagers, to carry out attacks on migrants and LGBTQ individuals. He circulated videos online for purpose of recruitment and spreading extremism. This is what led to his arrest initially. He was found in his apartment with a Kalashnikov and was arrested. But then he was accused of plotting another murder, and then another. And then he was actually plotting a lot of murders. He was plotting a revolution, in fact, planning to spread extremism throughout Russia. Now, one of them has already forgiven her attacker, but it looks like some of the extremists that he recruited were not so extreme, but just in it for the money, and they turned on Mikhail. Now, Mikhail is allegedly, or was allegedly, tied to some foreigner, not Ukraine. Well, we don't know, but he is tied to an outside group. But it's more personal than we may know, but it is about the media and media in general in Russia, and that those two aren't the only journalists who've been attacked and targeted. There is a targeted attack on Russian media, and I do think someone has taken great offense at the stories Russian media has run. If you don't like something, don't support it. But if you like something, you support it. And the problem is there are those who rather get ahead by tearing others down. And because sometimes that works, and it becomes the only way they operate is by tearing others down. You could see why, particularly with attacks on the Russian media, why Russia is so upset. Now, yes, Russia has said some horrible things themselves. They are not standing on the moral high ground. But if you want them to stand on the moral high ground, you have to have the same. You have to first stand on the moral high ground. You have to lift your game. You have to demand morality. You have to ensure that your side acts in a moral manner before you can throw stones. Before you can throw stones, you have to have a moral high ground. And most people don't. Their side is full of fanatics who smear, who lie, who deny reality. If this was a shitty piece of crap, then it will play out. If the new model is shitty and doesn't work, it will play out. But instead, they have to deny it happens. They have to hide what gets hit. They have to deny that there are long-range attacks. Now, there aren't that many. It does really it is really sometimes insignificant when you look that there were only 80 Ukrainians left in Konstantinovka, and you go, wow, and someone's going to go, should go, wow, 80 Ukrainians held off the entire Russian army? No, 80 Ukrainians held off 120 Russians. That's how low, intense the battle was. These aren't the big maneuvers of World War II. Heck, these aren't the big... Even in Vietnam, it would be truckloads of men going in. It'd be hundreds. Yet, and I think this is like going back to the change in warfare during the American Revolutionary period that saw the birth of guerrilla warfare. But it was though forts yet to die out. It was the beginning of the end for forts. But forts and cannon were hand in hand still. And this fortress mentality where they're not using the effective mobility they have. Now, Ukraine's attack on oil is obviously to reduce Russian mobility, not their economy. So, it tells me that Russia's done it to them. That's the only explanation I can possibly match, is that Ukraine's trying to hide the fact that its mobility is greatly reduced, that its freedom of movement is greatly reduced, either psychologically or physically, or both. And that if Ukraine cannot get these new drones to effective use, then they're only going to continue to lose more territory. And yes, I'll continue to not take a side and continue to annoy those who have taken sides. I know that. But thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. Please support the channel. You can support me on Ko-Fi, Patreon, buy my books, buy my merch. All my links are in the link tree. Now you find that in my profile, link description below, or scan the QR code on the screen. Thank you for listening. I really appreciate you, and see you in the next video. Bye for now.